opportunity for discussion. So now it's up for discussion. Yep.
Nice to see you all. My name is Kevin Swanson. I left the DNR in December of 2018 after 20 years of employment by the state of Michigan, both DEQ and the DNR. Most of that time was spent as a wildlife biologist, and I was the previous large carnivore specialist prior to Cody Norton, who's here today. I'm here today to provide the truth regarding why I left the DNR, a job that I greatly enjoyed despite the constant internal and external conflict regarding bears, wolves, and mountain lions here in Michigan. I pared my speech down to 3 minutes, so I scratched everything out, but thank you for the extra time. I was generally new to this position during the wolf survey of 2014, but not new to being a forester and wildlife biologist. And I remember during that survey finding evidence of a new undocumented pack south of the Gwinn area. I submitted my data sheet to Brian Roll and Dean Beyer, as all other field people did that winter after tracking numerous wolves. From what I recall, only a select few people conducted the wolf survey prior to 2014. For reasons of efficiency, all wildlife biologists and technicians became involved in the survey that year, which made perfect sense logistically, as long as there's communication and trust. So back to that new pack that I believe I found. Early that next spring at a wolf conference I attended with Brian Grohl and Dean Beyer, both extremely great biologists, by the way. I found out that they did not count that new wolf pack when the model was run to provide a minimum population estimate. And that's okay as long as there's a debate about it, we can agree. But even worse, Dean and Brian did that without even having the courtesy to tell me as the large carnivore specialist. We had no conversation or debate, I was just told when I inquired. I was very unhappy about this, but I kept it to myself, as I was relatively new to the position and I wanted to build a good relationship with Dean and Brian and Christy Sitter, which are the three main wolf players, biologists in the Upper Peninsula. I respected them, and I still do respect them very much. And it is critically important to examine the data so wolf estimates are not overinflated. It's good to have checks and balances and look at each other's data sheets. That's what good science is all about. So I let it go. So now let's fast forward to the next wolf survey, held during snowpack of 2016. And by this time I had developed much thicker skin in the large carnivore specialist position because of so much debates and controversy regarding wolves and other species. During that particular survey, the DNR decided to have internal auditors review the information provided by each field surveyor. The auditors themselves would survey the same wolf packs as a way to double-check pack numbers. This is a good thing. It's a complicated survey that requires analysis of GPS data points as well as field surveys. It keeps the surveyors honest and the auditors honest, knowing that a coworker will basically survey that same pack. As long as there is dialogue and friendly debate and trust among coworkers. One of the packs that I was surveying that winter is called the Strawberry Lake Pack. Historically, that pack had only 2 wolves in it, which I found interesting because they had a relatively large range that spanned the area south of County Road 480 and basically north of the town of Gwinn. During my repeated visits to the Strawberry Lake Wolfpack range, and I spent much more time there than my auditor did, I found evidence of breeding, scratching, urination, estrus in urine, and I also confirmed more than 2 wolves in that pack. From recollection, I think the number was 4, but I didn't save the data sheets I should have, but you can look back. A few months later, as I sat in my office, I found out that Brian Roll, who was my auditor, had adjusted my number downward. Again, without the courtesy of telling me he had done it, and without the courtesy of a friendly debate between biologists. When I found this out, I immediately confronted him as he passed by my office. He then told me to blank off, and then walked back to his office. At that point, I had become very angry, but somehow I restrained myself. I think a coworker calmed me down. And I stayed in my office and tried to decide how best to handle the situation. I'm supposed to be a leader in this program. few minutes afterward, Brian returned to my office. He then apologized to me and said he would change the number back to what I had stated for the strawberry late pack. And again, I don't recall the exact number, and it's really immaterial because there's a bigger problem here. I stood up and looked Brian directly at Brian directly and said that I demanded to review all data sheets for all UP staff. I did this because if he changed my numbers, the large carnivore specialist for the state of Michigan, without telling me, who else is he doing this to? He and Brian, or he and Dean Beyer. And again, I want to say I really respect these people. They're great biologists. I had been told that this had happened to other staff, and I wanted to look into it directly. Brian then went on to berate nearly every wildlife biologist and wildlife technician in the Upper Peninsula in front of me, and other people heard it. He went on to say he didn't trust John Depew, the biologist in Berga. He didn't know what he was doing with the wolf survey. Then he moved to Dave Gentoft in the East UP, said that Dave was making all kinds of mistakes. His data couldn't be trusted. Then he insulted Cody Norton, who's here today, your current large carnivore specialist, and Don Brown, a technician that I had hired and worked so closely with in the Shingleton unit when I was the wildlife biologist there, saying that they had counted coyote tracks as wolf tracks. Now these are all seasoned, experienced wildlife division field people. I sat there in awe as he went on and on. You know what I did? I did nothing. I did something, but it wasn't enough. I refused to cause unrest with all these field staff that I knew relatively well. I refused to cause unrest internally. Instead, I notified supervisors of the problem and demanded a conference call with Lansing staff to sort it out, and I didn't want the field staff to know. I wanted it to be done quietly and the data be re-examined. That call was set up by Steve Beyer. I don't have a lot of respect for Steve Beyer, a Lansing supervisor, and that call, from what I remember, involved he, Steve Beyer, Dean Beyer, Brian Roll, and Sarah Cummins. Sarah Cummins was my current supervisor at the time, and Shannon Hanna prior to that. Sarah Cummins fully supported me and was very angry when I called her. And despite my request, no UP supervisors were on that call. And I was angry with the UP supervisors for not holding these people accountable for having so much power and being able to just run roughshod over people, basically. During that call, it didn't go in my favor. I went to Russ Mason with this through emails. I never saved any of this because I never thought I'd throw the DNR under the bus because I love the DNR. We were basically told during that call to play nice and that nothing more would be done. On that day, I decided I would leave the DNR. And many months later, I took a job with the Nature Conservancy as their Director of Forestry here in the state of Michigan. And I recently retired from that position. Now I'm a burger guy at the Dairy Queen Marquette that I partially own. I'm really enjoying that. All data, this is what I request, Dan. All data from at least the last 3 surveys should be re-examined by someone externally, such as Jim Hamill or other notable biologists from other states. UP field staff should be interviewed so they can share their opinions and the truth, if they dare say it, and I'm sure many won't, without fear of repercussion and without fear of intimidation from certain biologists that have very strong personalities. The folks that I've mentioned, who are wonderful biologists, they work more than 40 hours a week, they work all the time, but they have unintentionally become too attached to wolves, I believe. They're all in favor, at least I believe they're in favor of a harvest, but the wolf estimates have been purposely lowered because of a lack of trust among field staff. And I should have done something about this long ago. I should have went directly to Director Cray, and I chose to leave quietly instead because I didn't want to cause a big problem for the staff. But I was not happy with the UP supervisors for not holding that staff accountable and not allowing them to have so much power, because wolves, as you know, they are a great species. I think the DNR is
the same